My daughter told me to stay out of her marriage, so I took back the house I gave her for her wedding gift. My name is Loretta James. I'm 64 years old, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. Life's taught me a lot, but nothing stings quite like realizing the child you raised with love and sacrifices thinks you've become disposable. I never imagined the daughter I nearly died bringing into this world would turn around and say, "Stay out of my marriage, Mama. It's none of your business." Especially not when that same marriage was built on land I paid for, a house I gifted, and blessings I prayed over. But baby, let me tell you something. When disrespect walks in through the front door, generosity walks out the back. If this story resonated with your soul, hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. What country are you tuning in from? Sugar? I stood on the porch of the house I'd given Jasmine, my heart swelling with pride and a twinge of ache. The white colonial, with its wide columns and blooming azaleas, was more than brick and mortar. It was my life's work poured into a gift for my only child. 35 years at the DMV, counting pennies, skipping vacations, and praying over every mortgage payment. I'd handed her the keys at her wedding 6 months ago. Tears in my eyes as I whispered, "This is for you, baby girl. Build a life here." Today, I was back to drop off a quilt I'd sewn for their living room. A patchwork of her childhood, scraps from her prom dress, her old choir robe, and the blanket she'd clung to as a toddler. The September sun warmed my shoulders as I knocked, the door swinging open to reveal Jasmine. Her smile bright but tight at the edges. "Mama, you didn't tell me you were coming by," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice carried that new tone she'd picked up since marrying Daryl. Polished, careful, like she was reading from a script. "Didn't know I needed an appointment to see my own daughter," I teased, holding up the quilt. "Brought you something to warm up this place." Her eyes softened as she took it, fingers tracing the stitches. "It's beautiful, Mama. You didn't have to." "Had to," I said, winking. "Can't have my grandbabies growing up in a house with no soul." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. The living room smelled of lemon polish, every surface gleaming. Too perfect, like a showroom. Daryl's influence, no doubt. He liked things just so. His car waxed weekly, his shirts ironed crisp. At the wedding, I'd thought his charm was a blessing. The way he'd spun Jasmine around the dance floor, whispering promises that made her glow. But his toast that night still nagged at me. The way he'd raised his glass and said, "To my queen, who knows when to let a man be a man." The room had laughed, but something in his tone, sharp, possessive, had lodged in my chest like a splinter. "Jasmine, where's Daryl at?" I asked, settling onto the couch. It was new, stiff, not the kind you sink into with a sigh. "Working late," she said quickly, folding the quilt over her arm. "He's been putting in long hours at the firm." "Mm-hmm," I said, watching her. She moved to the kitchen, busying herself with a pitcher of sweet tea. Her sundress swayed, but her shoulders were hunched, like she was carrying something heavy. I followed her, leaning against the counter. "You happy, baby girl? This big house, that husband of yours, everything you dreamed?" She froze, just for a second, before pouring the tea. "Course I'm happy, Mama. Why wouldn't I be?" Her words were too quick, like she'd rehearsed them. I sipped the tea, cold and sweet, and studied her. Jasmine had always been my firecracker. Loud, bold, the girl who'd argue with her teachers just to prove a point. But now she seemed smaller, her spark dimmed. I wanted to press, to ask why her laugh sounded hollow. But the memory of her wedding day stopped me. She'd been radiant in her lace gown, clinging to Daryl's arm like he was her whole world. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. "All right," I said, setting the glass down. "Just checking on my baby." She smiled, but it wobbled. "I'm fine, Mama, really." I left that day with a knot in my stomach, promising myself I'd visit more often. But the next few weeks turned into a blur. Church meetings, book club, and helping my neighbor Miss Clara with her arthritis. When I finally made it back to Jasmine's, it was early October, the air crisp with fall. I pulled into the driveway unannounced, carrying a pan of my famous cornbread. The front door was cracked open, and I heard voices inside, sharp, low, like a storm about to break. "Jasmine, you don't get it, do you?" Daryl's voice cut through the air, tight with irritation. "I'm out there busting my ass, and you're questioning me." "I wasn't questioning you," Jasmine said, her voice small, pleading. "I just asked." "You don't ask, you trust. That's what a wife does." I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. My heart thudded, a mix of anger and fear. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking, and both of them turned. Jasmine's eyes widened, her face paling. Daryl's jaw tightened, but he flashed that charming smile, the one that had fooled me at first. "Loretta," he said, smooth as silk. "Didn't know you were stopping by." "Didn't know I needed to call ahead for my own daughter's house," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. I set the cornbread on the counter, my eyes locked on Jasmine. She was twisting a dish towel in her hands, her knuckles pale. "Mama, you should have texted," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Seems like I came at the right time," I said, glancing at Daryl. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his posture casual, but his eyes hard. "Just a little husband-wife chat," he said, chuckling. "Nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe him, but the air felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. Jasmine wouldn't meet my gaze, her eyes fixed on the floor. I noticed her sleeve had ridden up, revealing a faint bruise on her wrist, purple and splotchy. My stomach twisted. "Jasmine, what's that on your arm?" I asked, stepping closer. She yanked her sleeve down, her movements jerky. "It's nothing, Mama. Bumped into the door frame." "Door frame," I repeated, my voice flat. I looked at Daryl, who shrugged, his smile never wavering. "She's clumsy sometimes," he said. "You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, but I knew I didn't like the way he was looking at me, like he was daring me to push further. I wanted to grab Jasmine, drag her out of that house, and demand the truth, but she was already moving away, busying herself with the cornbread, slicing it with shaky hands. "Let's eat," she said, her voice too bright. "Mama, you staying?" I stayed, but every bite tasted like ash. Daryl kept the conversation light, talking about his promotion, the new car he was eyeing. Jasmine nodded along, her smiles forced. I watched her closely, noticing how she flinched when Daryl's hand brushed hers, how she kept her phone tucked under a napkin, like she didn't want me to see it. After dinner, I pulled her aside in the hallway, away from Daryl's ears. "Baby girl, you okay?" "Really?" She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Mama, please, don't start." "Don't start what?" I pressed, keeping my voice low. "I see that bruise. I hear how he talks to you. If something's wrong, you tell me." "Nothing's wrong," she snapped, her eyes flashing with something. Anger, fear, I couldn't tell. "You can't just come in here and act like you know my life." Her words hit like a slap. I stepped back, my chest tight. "Jasmine, I gave you this house. I raised you. I think I've earned the right to care." She softened, but only a fraction. "I know you care, Mama, but this is my marriage. Stay out of it." I left that night, with her words echoing in my head, each one a dagger. Stay out of it, as if I could ignore the bruise, the tension, the way my daughter seemed to be shrinking before my eyes. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. I thought of the house, my gift to her, built on love and sacrifice. I thought of Daryl's toast, his voice dripping with control. And I thought of Jasmine's phone, always hidden, always close. Something was wrong. I didn't know what, but I wasn't going to sit back and watch my daughter fade. I'd given her that house to build a life, not a cage. If she wouldn't talk, I'd find another way to get answers. I'd start with Daryl, his late nights, his secrets. I'd watch, I'd listen, and if I had to, I'd take back what was mine. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "Sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to snap. Love you." I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my gut told me this was only the beginning. Has someone ever dismissed your concerns only to regret it later? Drop your experience in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you're deep in this story now. The weight of Jasmine's words, "Stay out of my marriage," lingered like a bruise as I drove away from her house that October evening. Her voice, sharp and defensive, echoed in my mind, clashing with the image of my bold, fearless girl who once stood on my porch, demanding I let her stay up past midnight to finish a debate speech. The bruise on her wrist, her hidden phone, Daryl's controlling tone. They were pieces of a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. But I wasn't about to let my daughter slip away. I'd given her that house to build a future, not to trap her in a life that dimmed her light. As I pulled into my driveway, her text buzzed through. "Sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to snap. Love you." I stared at it, my heart torn between hope and dread, knowing I couldn't stay out of it. Not when every instinct screamed something was wrong. A month later, November brought a chill to Charlotte, and with it, Jasmine's 28th birthday. I'd planned a dinner at my place, her favorite smothered pork chops, collards, and peach cobbler. Just like when she was a girl, I'd texted her all week, confirming the time, even sent a photo of the cobbler cooling on my counter. No response. By 7 p.m., the table was set, candles flickering, and my calls went straight to voicemail. My chest tightened with worry, but I told myself she was just busy. Daryl's job kept her on a tight leash. Galas, client dinners, his endless demands. Still, missing her own birthday, that wasn't my Jasmine. I drove to her house, the colonial looming under the streetlights, its windows dark, except for a faint glow in the living room. I knocked, my breath catching, as Daryl opened the door. His tie loosened, a glass of bourbon in hand. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Loretta," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Didn't expect you tonight." "Where's Jasmine?" I asked, peering past him. The house was too quiet, the air stale. "She's resting," he said, his tone clipped. "Long day." "It's her birthday," I said, my voice sharp. "She didn't show for dinner, didn't answer my calls." He shrugged, sipping his drink. "She's been under the weather, forgot to charge her phone, probably." I didn't believe him, not with the way his eyes darted, avoiding mine. I pushed past him, calling, "Jasmine, baby, you here?" "Mama," Jasmine's voice came from upstairs, faint but startled. She appeared at the top of the staircase, wrapped in a robe, her hair disheveled. "What are you doing here?" "You missed your birthday dinner," I said, climbing the steps. I was worried sick. She glanced at Daryl, then back at me, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry, I forgot." "Forgot?" I stopped, my hand on the banister. "Jasmine, I called you all day, texted you. Where's your phone?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the robe's belt. I don't know, dead maybe." Daryl stepped closer, his voice smooth but firm. "She's been tired, Loretta. Let her rest." I ignored him, my eyes locked on Jasmine. "Baby, what's going on? This ain't you?" Her face hardened, a flash of that fire I remembered. But it wasn't aimed at Daryl. It was aimed at me. "Mama, stop. You can't just show up and demand answers. This is my marriage. You gave me the house, not your opinions." Her words cut deeper than I'd thought possible, each one a shard of glass in my chest. I stood there, stunned. The girl I'd raised, now a stranger defending a man who made my skin crawl. Daryl's smirk was barely hidden as he sipped his bourbon, watching me falter. "All right," I said, my voice low, trembling with hurt. "I'll go." I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. My heart shattered, but my resolve hardening. Jasmine could push me away, but I wasn't blind. Something was wrong, and I wasn't going to let her words stop me from finding out what. The house, my gift, felt like a chain around her neck, and Daryl was pulling it tighter every day. The next morning, I sat at my dining table, the untouched birthday dinner still in the fridge, my coffee cold. I needed answers, not just for me, but for Jasmine. I called Shonda, Jasmine's childhood friend, who'd known her since they were braiding each other's hair in my backyard. Shonda answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Loretta, it's been a minute," she said. "How you holding up?" "Not great," I admitted, my voice thick. "Jasmine's different, quiet. She missed her birthday dinner," Shonda said. Her phone was dead, but Daryl was there, acting like he owned her. Shonda sighed, long and heavy. "I didn't want to say nothing, but I've been worried too. She don't call me no more, Loretta. Not since the wedding. And Daryl, he's not who he says he is." My heart skipped. "What you mean?" "I heard things," she said, lowering her voice. "From folks at his firm. He's got a past, Loretta, a wife, not an ex-wife, a wife, still married, out in Raleigh." I gripped the phone, my pulse racing. "You sure?" "Not 100%, she admitted. "But I trust the source. You need to look into it." Bigamy. The word hit like a thunderclap. If Daryl was still married, everything about him, his charm, his promises, the life he'd built with Jasmine, was a lie. My daughter was trapped in a marriage that might not even be legal, living in a house I'd given her to start a family. Not to be deceived. I thanked Shonda, my mind already racing. I couldn't confront Daryl yet, not without proof. Jasmine wouldn't believe me, not after last night. I needed someone who could dig deeper, someone discreet. By noon, I was on the phone with a private investigator, a man named Curtis I'd found through a friend at church. His voice was gruff, but kind, and he listened as I poured out my fears. Jasmine's bruises, her silence, Daryl's control, Shonda's tip about another wife. "I'll look into it," Curtis said. "Give me a week. If he's hiding something, I'll find it." "Make it quick," I said, my voice firm. "My daughter's in trouble." That week crawled by, each day heavier than the last. I didn't visit Jasmine, though I wanted to. I kept seeing her face, the way she'd snapped at me, the bruise on her wrist. I kept hearing Daryl's toast, his voice dripping with control. And then there was the house, my gift, my legacy. A thought struck me, sharp and clear. The deed was still in my name. I'd never transferred it to Jasmine, thinking there'd be time later, after they settled in. It was a technicality, but it was mine, a lifeline I hadn't realized I held. Curtis called on a gray Tuesday morning, his voice low and urgent. "Loretta, you sitting down?" "Tell me," I said, my heart pounding. "Daryl's got a wife in Raleigh, married 7 years, no divorce filed. Her name's Vanessa. They've got a kid, a boy, 5 years old. He's been splitting his time between Raleigh and Charlotte, keeping it quiet. Jasmine doesn't know." I closed my eyes, anger and grief crashing over me. My daughter, my bright, beautiful girl, was living a lie. Daryl wasn't just controlling. He was a fraud, a bigamist, building a life on deception, while Jasmine withered under his grip. I thought of the house, its white columns and blooming azaleas, now tainted by his lies. I'd given it to Jasmine for love, for family, but Daryl had turned it into a prison. "What now?" I asked Curtis, my voice trembling with rage. "You've got options," he said. "The house is in your name. You could pull it back, legally. As for Daryl, you could go to the police, but that'll hit Jasmine hard. She's not ready to hear this." He was right. Jasmine's words, "Stay out of my marriage," still stung, but I couldn't let her stay in the dark. I thanked Curtis, promising to follow up, and hung up. I sat there staring at the deed on my kitchen table, its edges worn from years in my safe. It was more than a house now. It was leverage, a way to force the truth into the open. Daryl thought he could control my daughter, my gift, my legacy. He was wrong. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady as I texted Jasmine. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. My place." I didn't wait for a reply. The deed was in my name, and Daryl's secrets were in my hands. If Jasmine wouldn't listen, I'd make her see. And if Daryl thought he could keep playing his game, he was about to learn what happens when a mother's love turns to fire. The deed to the house sat on my kitchen table, its weight heavier than the paper it was printed on. Curtis's call had confirmed my worst fears. Daryl was a bigamist, a liar with a wife and child in Raleigh, weaving a double life while my Jasmine faded under his control. Her words, "Stay out of my marriage," still burned. But the truth was a fire I couldn't ignore. I'd texted her to come over, to talk, but deep down, I knew she wouldn't listen. Not yet. My daughter was stubborn, always had been, and Daryl's grip on her was tighter than I'd feared. But I had the deed, the truth, and a mother's resolve. If Jasmine wouldn't see reason, I'd force the issue. The next day, I met Curtis at a diner off Tryon Street, the air thick with grease and coffee. He slid a manila envelope across the table, his eyes steady. "Everything's in there," he said. Marriage certificate from Raleigh, photos of Daryl with his other wife, bank records showing he's been funneling money to an account Jasmine doesn't know about. I flipped through the pages, my stomach churning. Pictures of Daryl laughing with a woman, Vanessa, at a park, a little boy on his shoulders, bank statements with transfers to an account in Raleigh, dated just days after he'd moved into my daughter's house. My house. I clenched my jaw, thanking Curtis as I tucked the envelope under my arm. Back home, I spread the evidence on my dining table. Each document, a nail in Daryl's coffin. But Jasmine's voice haunted me, her anger, her loyalty to him. I had to act, not just for her, but for the life she deserved. I called her again, my voice firm. "Jasmine, come to my place. Now we need to talk." "Mama, I'm busy," she said, her tone clipped. "Daryl's got a work thing tonight." "Busy," I snapped, my patience fraying. "You're living with a man who's married to someone else. He's got a wife, Jasmine, a kid. You need to see this." Silence stretched on the line, then a sharp laugh. "You're crazy. He wouldn't do that." "Come see the proof," I said, "or I'm coming to you." She hung up. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding with fury and hurt. She was my daughter, my blood, but she was blind, caught in Daryl's web. I couldn't wait for her to wake up. The deed was in my name, and that gave me power. I called my lawyer, a friend from church named Evelyn, and explained everything. Daryl's bigamy, Jasmine's refusal to listen, the house still legally mine. "You can issue an eviction notice," Evelyn said. "It's your property. They'd have 30 days to vacate." "Do it," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I want them out." By evening, the notice was drafted. I drove to Jasmine's house, my hands trembling as I slipped it into their mailbox. The Colonial stood silent, its windows glowing faintly. I imagined Jasmine inside, unaware of the storm coming. I wanted to protect her, to shake her awake, but she'd drawn a line. "Stay out of my marriage." Fine. If she wanted me out, she'd get out of my house. I texted her one last time. "You wanted me out of your marriage. Fine. Get out of my house. Check the mailbox." The next morning, my phone rang at dawn. Jasmine's voice was frantic, raw. "Mama, he's gone. Daryl's gone. He took my car, my savings, everything." I sat up, my heart racing. "What do you mean, gone?" "He left last night," she sobbed. "After your text, he saw the eviction notice, packed a bag, and drained our account. I woke up, and he was just gone." I was at her house in 20 minutes, my anger at Daryl warring with the pain of hearing her voice break. She opened the door, her eyes red, her face crumpled. She fell into my arms, sobbing. "Mama, I didn't know. He was lying to me the whole time." I held her, my own tears falling, as I stroked her hair. "I know, baby. I tried to tell you." She pulled back, her hands shaking. "He said he loved me. Said we were building a life. How could I be so stupid?" "You ain't stupid," I said, guiding her to the couch. "He fooled us all. But I've got proof. His other wife, his kid, the money he's been hiding. He's a liar, Jasmine." She stared at the floor, her shoulders hunched. "I saw the papers in the mailbox, the eviction notice. You're really taking the house?" I swallowed hard, the weight of my decision pressing down. "I had to wake you up, baby. You wouldn't listen." Her eyes met mine, filled with hurt and something else, shame. "I'm sorry, Mama, I pushed you away. I thought he was my future." I wanted to stay angry, to remind her how she'd cut me out, but her pain was mine too. I took her hand, squeezing it. "We'll figure this out. You're home now." Then she whispered, her voice barely audible, "Mama, I'm pregnant." The words hit like a freight train. Pregnant. My daughter, alone, betrayed, carrying a child whose father was a fraud. I froze, torn between fury at Daryl and a fierce protective love for the life inside her. "How long?" I asked, my voice tight. "2 months," she said, tears spilling. "I found out last week. I was gonna tell him, but now," I pulled her close, my mind racing. Daryl was gone, but the house was still mine, a tether I could use to rebuild her life. Yet the baby changed everything. I was angry at Daryl, at Jasmine for shutting me out, at myself for not acting sooner. But she was my daughter, and that baby was my blood. I'd fight for them both. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice firm. "You and that baby, you're mine to protect." She nodded, clinging to me, but the open questions lingered. Daryl was out there, with her money, her car, and a secret family in Raleigh. The house was mine, but could I really take it from her now, pregnant and broken? And what would happen when Daryl resurfaced? Because men like him always did. I held Jasmine tighter, my heart a battlefield of love and rage, knowing this was far from over. Jasmine's confession, "I'm pregnant," hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy with promise and pain. I held her on that couch, in the house I'd given her, now tainted by Daryl's lies. His betrayal had gutted her, taking her car, her savings, and her trust, leaving her broken and carrying his child. My heart burned with rage, but her tears and the life growing inside her stoked a fiercer instinct to protect, to rebuild. The deed to the house was still mine, a card I'd played with the eviction notice, but now it felt like a lifeline, not a weapon. Jasmine needed me, and I needed a plan. Daryl was gone, but he wouldn't get away. The next morning, I sat Jasmine down at my kitchen table. The manila envelope from Curtis spread out before us. Marriage certificates, photos, bank records, Daryl's double life laid bare. She stared at the evidence, her hands trembling, tears streaking her face. "He had a wife," she whispered. "A son. How did I not see?" "You loved him," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Liars like that, they're good at hiding, but he's not hiding no more." "What do we do, Mama?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for the strength she'd lost. "We fight," I said. "We take him down." I called Evelyn, my lawyer, and we drove to the police station that afternoon. Jasmine was quiet, clutching the envelope like it was her last anchor. The officer, a woman with kind eyes named Detective Harris, listened as I recounted everything. Daryl's bigamy, the stolen savings, the car, the bruise on Jasmine's wrist. Jasmine added details, her voice breaking as she described how he'd controlled her phone, her life, her spirit. Harris nodded, taking notes, her face hardening when we showed her the proof. "This is enough for charges," Harris said. "Bigamy, theft, fraud. We'll need to track him down, but this is solid." As we left, my phone buzzed. Curtis, my investigator, with news. "Loretta, the other wife, Vanessa, she's in." I reached out, showed her the evidence. "She wants to talk." Vanessa met us the next day at a coffee shop in Raleigh, her face a mirror of Jasmine's, worn, betrayed, but angry. Her 5-year-old son wasn't with her, and I was grateful. This wasn't a conversation for a child. She'd been married to Daryl for 7 years, thinking his long trips to Charlotte were for work. When Curtis showed her the truth, she'd collapsed, much like Jasmine. Now she was ready to fight. "He took my savings too," Vanessa said, her voice low. "Told me it was for our son's college fund. I want him locked up." Jasmine reached across the table, her hand finding Vanessa's. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." "Neither did I," Vanessa said, squeezing back. "But we'll make him pay." With both women on board, the case grew stronger. Harris filed charges, and the story spread like wildfire. By week's end, headlines screamed across Charlotte, "Man caught, living double life." Thanks to mother's bold move, reporters called, wanting interviews, but I waved them off. This wasn't about fame, it was about justice. Daryl was still missing, but the police were closing in, tracking his credit cards to a motel in Georgia. Every day, I prayed he'd face a judge soon. Meanwhile, the house sat empty, a reminder of love twisted by deceit. Jasmine was staying with me, sleeping in her old room, her belly growing. I looked at the deed, still in my name, and made a decision. I called a realtor and put the colonial up for sale. It sold in a month, the proceeds a hefty sum after years of appreciation. I sat Jasmine down, my voice steady. "I'm using this money to start something," I said. "A women's shelter for wives like you and Vanessa, caught in lies, needing a way out. No one should feel trapped." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, you don't have to." "I do," I said. "This is bigger than us now." The shelter opened in spring, a modest building in Charlotte's west side, named Haven of Hope. I poured half the house's proceeds into it: beds, counselors, legal aid for women escaping men like Daryl. Jasmine helped, her strength returning as she painted walls and sorted donations. It was a start, a way to turn our pain into purpose. Have you ever had to choose between family and doing what's right? Tell me in the comments. Let's talk about it. By summer, Jasmine's belly was round, her due date close. She lived with me, her old room now a nursery in progress, painted soft yellow. I'd catch her smiling sometimes, rubbing her stomach, whispering to the baby. But the hurt lingered in the way she'd stare out the window, wondering where Daryl was, if he'd ever face her again. One August evening, as we sat on my porch, sipping iced tea, Jasmine went into labor. I rushed her to the hospital, holding her hand through every contraction, my heart swelling with fear and love. Hours later, she gave birth to a daughter, a tiny girl with her mother's eyes and a cry that filled the room. Jasmine named her Amara, meaning eternal. I held her, my granddaughter, tears streaming down my face. She was perfect, a new beginning born from chaos. "Mama, look at her," Jasmine whispered, exhausted but glowing. "She's ours. She's everything," I said, kissing Amara's tiny forehead. The shelter thrived, a beacon for women rebuilding their lives. Jasmine started working there, sharing her story, helping others find their strength. Daryl was caught a month later, arrested in a rundown motel, charged with bigamy, theft, and fraud. Vanessa and Jasmine both testified, their voices steady in court, reclaiming their power. He got 5 years, a small victory, but enough to close that chapter. As I watched Jasmine cradle Amara one evening, singing a lullaby I'd once sung to her, I thought about the house, the eviction notice, the headlines. Some folks called me harsh, said I'd been too hard on my daughter. But I saw it differently. I'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, turned a gift into a legacy bigger than us both. Some folks say I was being petty. I say I was being powerful. You don't water a tree that throws shade at you. If that ending gave you a little chill, you know what to do. Subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if your child disrespected you like that? I want to hear from you.